In this story, Lara Montes, a nurse in a small town, tends to a young man who is injured, unaware that he is part of a cartel. Now, due to knowing too much, she becomes a target. With a hidden past as a special forces colonel, she will fight to protect her community. Before you listen to this story, be sure to subscribe and activate the bell so you won't miss more stories like this. Let's begin. Lara Montes woke up to the gentle sound of the bells from the small church next to the health center. The sunrise painted the sky in soft shades of pink as she sat up with her usual calm. With steady, determined steps, she walked through the modest hallway of her home. Polished wooden furniture, photographs of rural landscapes, and an old family portrait hanging across from the bed. Still, behind this warm appearance, there was something in her eyes that showed focus and discipline. At the local hospital, the quiet noise of patients and nurses was part of her everyday life. Her colleagues greeted her with respect. "Good morning, Nurse Montes," they would say, unaware of the hidden story behind her white uniform. With a kind smile, she replied and stepped into the emergency room. There, among monitors and stretchers, her steady hands gave medicine, and her voice brought comfort. Every movement was quick and precise, the result of many years of hard work. At noon, Lara stepped out into the small hospital yard for some fresh air. She greeted Dona Carmen, the cleaning lady, and Dr. Ruiz, who joked about the smell of freshly baked cake coming from her lunch bag. She shrugged and explained she had carrot cake for lunch. This simple gesture only made the town trust her more. She was a devoted, approachable nurse. In the afternoon, she cared for elders, children, and farm workers. They saw her as an angel in a white coat. No one imagined that behind her calm face was a sharp, strategic mind shaped by many battles. As the sun began to set, Lara put away her uniform, changed into simple clothes, and walked home. A small adobe house covered with jasmine vines. The whole town was resting in peace, and she quietly enjoyed that peace as if it were a fragile treasure she had to protect. On her way, she thought about the deep silence of the night ahead. She stopped for a moment at her door and, almost without thinking, touched the handle of her key. Then she gave one last smile and went inside. She hung up her nurse's bag, took off her shoes, and settled in the living room. On the small table, her phone showed messages from friends. She answered briefly, because peace was her safe place. She turned on a salt lamp, took a deep breath, and for the first time that day, she let her guard down. But that night, the distant hum of engines broke the stillness. A low, muffled sound, barely noticeable, passed through the wall. Lara closed her eyes. Her face became unreadable. To anyone else, it might look like surprise or curiosity, but for her, it was the first sign that something unusual was coming. Lara woke up to the unsettling murmur of people gathered in the town square. When she looked out the window, she saw groups of neighbors standing in small circles, tense faces, nervous eyes. A dry wind shook the worn fabric flags, and the morning sun lit up cracked walls and doors sealed with wooden planks. The town, once calm and welcoming, now felt like a silent trap. On her way to the hospital, she crossed the main street. Almost no shops were open. Don Ernesto, the baker, leaned against the doorway of his shop, arms crossed and a deep frown on his face. When he saw her, he spoke quietly. "Good morning, Nurse Montes." "Good morning, Don Ernesto. Everything all right?" "Just getting by," he answered in a broken voice. "Those cartel men don't stop. They've already collected taxes from most of the houses." Lara nodded seriously. She knew the cartel had set its own rules. Drug sales and threats had become part of daily life. Any resistance, even a careless comment, could cost a person dearly. A little further ahead, two young men leaning on a pickup whispered, asking if anyone had seen Father Rubio, the local priest. Rumor had it he had disappeared after refusing to cooperate with the bosses. When she reached the health center, the atmosphere was tense. Nurses hurried to open doors and turn on lights. Dr. Ruiz went through patient files with a serious expression. In the waiting room, an elderly woman clutched her purse, trembling. A muscular man showed a fresh gunshot wound to his thigh. Everyone lowered their eyes when Lara entered, as if looking for comfort they knew was hard to find. "How are you feeling, Mr. Gomez?" Lara asked, gently touching the patient's shoulder. "Pain, a lot of pain," he whispered. "But I'm afraid to stay here. They said anyone who's useful to them is welcome. And those who aren't, well, you know." The nurse took a few moments to calm him, changing his bandage and giving him painkillers. She kept her voice soft but firm. She knew that, even in the middle of fear, her presence inspired trust. Still, the shadow of violence hung over every action. This was a besieged town, where medical routine mixed with the silence of death. During the day, patients came in with gunshot wounds, overdoses, and unexplained beatings. An older man told how gunmen had set up a temporary camp in an old abandoned warehouse. Each time the sun went down, gunfire and cruel laughter shattered the night, forcing neighbors to lie on the floor or hide behind their furniture. By late afternoon, Lara went outside again to attend a scheduled home birth for Mrs. Lopez. She walked along a dusty alley, under the buzz of a drone patrolling low overhead. Neighbors greeted her in hushed voices, as if a loud hello could draw the attention of the masked men nearby. Even the children seemed to have learned not to run or play freely. They knew gunshots could ring out at any moment. At the door, Mrs. Lopez hugged her with gratitude. "Thank you, dear. I don't know what we'd do without you." "I'm here to help," Lara replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Don't worry. Everything will be all right soon." As she helped bring a baby into the world, Lara's heart pounded, not only from the joy of new life, but from the danger surrounding them. Her instincts told her something very serious was coming, but for now she could only focus on the urgent task, delivering a new life in the middle of fear. When she returned home, the heavy silence of night had settled. The town's lights flickered, and the echo of distant footsteps came like a warning. Lara closed the door behind her, leaned her back against the wood, and took a deep breath, ready to face whatever was coming. Lara started her afternoon shift thinking it would be just another day, until the duty nurse called her in a tense voice. "Nurse Montes, they're bringing in a gunshot victim. Young guy, about 20, internal bleeding. He's at the entrance." She nodded and walked quickly toward the emergency room. Pushing the door open, she saw the young man lying on the stretcher. Torn shirt, blood-stained pants, short, shallow breaths. 2 assistants held in 4-line, while another kept pressure on the wound. Lara moved closer with calm authority. "Hi, I'm Lara Montes. I'm going to check you. Stay calm." "Am I?" His voice was weak, filled with fear. "Am I going to be okay?" Without answering directly, she applied local anesthetic and cleaned the wound with precision. Every movement was quick and sure, her mind processing details like she was reviewing a tactical plan. The young man flinched at the sting. As she worked, Lara noticed a tattoo on his forearm, a stylized symbol like a scorpion with a crown. It wasn't common in town. She had seen it in news reports about city gangs. She kept her suspicion to herself. "I need you to tell me if you have any allergies," she asked firmly. "Have you ever had a reaction to medicine?" He shook his head, holding her gaze for a moment before losing consciousness from pain and shock. "Slow 4 drip and get oxygen ready." "I'm going to stitch him," she instructed. While she stitched the wound with expert hands, Dr. Ruiz walked in. "What do we know about him?" he asked, leaning over the stretcher. "Name, family?" "Nothing certain," Lara answered without looking up. "Found just outside Don Cheno's ranch. Fresh bullet wound to the right side. He had almost nothing with him, just an old backpack." The doctor frowned. This smells like a high-level cartel case. If that's true, things could get messy. Lara said nothing. She finished the stitches, applied a pressure bandage, and gently checked his pulse. Low blood pressure, she reported. Monitor every 5 minutes, and tell me if anything changes. As the team moved away, Lara glanced down the hallway. The pace in the ER had changed. Everyone moved with caution, aware they had just treated one of their people. No one dared say the word cartel, but the fear was in the air. 2 nurses exchanged worried looks. "Do you think he'll talk?" one whispered. "Doubt it," the other replied. "They might grab him to make him give up names." Lara went back to the patient, adjusted his oxygen, and checked the 4. She thought about the complexity of her work. Helping anyone, even if that person might be part of the violence crushing the town. Her ethics wouldn't let her refuse care, but she knew this young man could bring trouble. As she stepped out to check records, her eyes caught the half-closed door of the doctor's office. Through the glass, she saw 2 rough-looking men speaking in low voices. Likely cartel informants, talking about recent operations and sanctions. Lara paused, weighing the possibility of a bigger plan. A power move that might mean silencing anyone who knew too much. Her instincts told her the young man wouldn't survive without protection. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "I can't let them move him alone. I need to keep watch." With determined steps, she returned to the stretcher. The young man opened his eyes, looking at her with curiosity and a hint of mistrust. "Will you help me, Nurse Montes?" he asked, voice broken. "I'll do everything I can," she said, placing her hand on his shoulder. Outside, the sky was growing dark. The town's air was heavy with fear and violence. But inside the hospital, Lara was creating a small oasis of safety. Still, she knew caring for this young man meant stepping into deep waters. And maybe she had just become a target herself. Lara left the hospital carrying the weight of the day on her shoulders. The half-hidden sun painted the cracked walls of the town in orange. With every step, she felt the neighbors' gaze, whispering behind closed doors. When she reached the corner where the street to her home began, she stopped. A black car with tinted windows moved slowly, slowing even more each time it passed her house's entrance. The engine barely hummed, as if trying not to be heard, but to her, it was thunder. She leaned against a metal bollard, watching with a calm that masked her unease. The car slowed again, paused for a moment, then eased away. The street fell silent once more, save for the wind stirring dry leaves. Lara frowned. "Again?" she murmured. She began walking, but 20 meters ahead, the car returned. This time, the low beam flashed off the windshield, and Lara saw the outline of a man inside, his head covered by a balaclava. Her heart leapt. These weren't just curious onlookers. The vehicle passed into the shadow of a tree and vanished. In the distance, she heard the drone's dull buzz as it patrolled low overhead. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed. The whole town was under watch. Homemade cameras on corners, reinforced door peepholes, neighbors venturing out only in groups. But this buzz felt different, metallic, precise. She remembered stories online about high-tech surveillance drones with high-resolution cameras, able to record faces and movements from afar. At her front door, she found Don Julio, the carpenter, crouched down inspecting one of the reinforcement planks he'd installed days earlier. "Good evening, Don Julio," she greeted calmly. "Everything okay with the door?" "We're managing, nurse," he replied without looking up. "I've reinforced the hinges and added an extra lock. With what's happening, you never know." Lara nodded and studied him for a moment. He was a strong man with weathered skin and hands that showed years of hard work. She looked up at the sky. "I saw a drone a little while ago," she said. "It flew right over the street." Don Julio straightened, slipped his hands into his pockets, and regarded her solemnly. "Yes, I saw it. I think someone's watching us. We can't trust anything anymore. Neither the police nor the dark. Lara pressed her lips together, then fell silent. With a nod, Don Julio motioned her inside. The door creaked open. Inside, everything looked as she'd left it that morning. The side table with her phone, a simple vase of dried flowers, and the salt lamp still glowing. The air smelled of chamomile tea and old wood. As she put her nurse's bag in the closet, she heard the hum again. Closer this time, as if the drone hovered directly above the roof. She moved to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked up. A small black machine floated slowly, its blinking lights casting brief shadows. "What the hell?" she whispered. Suddenly, a sharp thump on the roof made her jump. Something metallic and small had struck the tiles. Lara stepped back, then without hesitation grabbed a small flashlight and her phone from the table. She dialed quickly and spoke in a low voice. "This is Lara. Yes, I've seen the drone. The black car is still circling. I can't handle this alone." "Understood," came a grave voice on the other end. "Stay calm and don't move. I'm on my way." She hung up, snapped off the salt lamp, and slid toward the wall where a framed picture hung. Gently, she moved it aside to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small, polished wooden box. With steady fingers, she opened it to find several photographs of herself in uniform, and a metal plaque inscribed, "Colonel Montes, Special Forces." For a moment, her face softened as she saw her younger reflection, full of strength. Then she closed the box and hid it again. Leaning against the wall, heart racing but step steady, she understood that these strange signs weren't random. Someone was looking for her, unaware of her true identity and capabilities. This night was going to be long. Lara closed the front door behind her and leaned against the wood. The drone's engine hum echoed in her mind along with the image of that black car circling her home. Now, in the dim light of her living room, everything felt more intimate and heavier. Barefoot, she walked across the wooden floorboards to the low table where her salt lamp stood. With steady fingers, she turned its base and snapped it off, plunging the room into half-darkness, lit only by the faint streetlight through the window. She went to the painting on the wall, a simple picture of dried flowers, and carefully moved it aside to reveal the hidden compartment. Inside the polished wooden box lay her past. Photographs, a metal nameplate, an old wristwatch, and a nearly faded military ID card. Lara set the box on the table and pulled out the first envelope. Inside was a photo of her in camouflage uniform, standing with other soldiers and smiling after a field exercise. On the back, in firm handwriting, her colonel had written, "Good job, Montes. Keep it up." The nurse sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let the pictures fall around her. One showed her mother's serious face as she sewed the national flag onto Lara's uniform. Another captured the moment Lara received a bravery medal in a spare ceremony room, surrounded by stern-faced officers. She remembered that day. The sharp crack of rifles firing salute, the sun's heat on her skin, the weight of the plaque against her chest. Pride and grief for fallen comrades had mingled in her heart. Suddenly, her mind took her back to a freezing desert night when Lieutenant Ramirez whispered, "Montes, we shouldn't be here. Orders come from above," she'd replied firmly. "Get ready." She recalled the crunch of gravel underfoot, bloodshot eyes of exhaustion, adrenaline surging through her veins. That night, they'd captured an enemy convoy threatening civilians, and Lara had ordered the advance. The base praised her afterward, but she knew every action came at a price. In her mind, she saw Ramirez's defeated face in an alley, and heard her colonel demanding reports and strategies. That past was her calling card to those who recognized it. And now, it could save her or destroy her. She shook her head to clear these thoughts. She gathered the photos, placed them back in the box beside the nameplate, and closed the lid. With a soft click, her secret sank back into shadow. She stood, returned the box to its hiding place, and hung the painting back on the wall. The living room looked just as before. A simple village home, no sign of a colonel. A gentle knock on the door startled her. Lara held her breath and, without rushing, walked to the entryway. Outside, Don Julio's quiet voice called, "Sorry for the hour, nurse. I brought more locks, just in case." She cracked the door open and looked at him. "Thank you, Don Julio. But everything's already secure. Good night." As she closed the door again, the silence felt heavy. Outside, the drone buzzed once more, closer this time. Lara pressed a hand to the wall, feeling the cool paint beneath her palm. Her secret was safe, but she knew it wouldn't stop whoever was searching for her. With calm steps, she walked toward the bedroom, ready for whatever came next. The command room door closed slowly after the last man left. The place was an old warehouse turned into their operations center. Metal tables, maps spread out, radios and pistols lined up on a board. At the far end, behind a large desk, 3 stern-looking men spoke in low voices while the rest of the staff stood quietly, hanging on every word. The first, nicknamed El Rey, the cell's local leader, tossed a handful of papers onto the table. "Here are the reports," he said firmly. "Nurse Montes treated that young gunshot victim 2 days ago. And she didn't just treat him. She asked questions, pressed him, and examined him more closely than anyone else." Another man, La Sombra, frowned as he picked up a dossier. "She knows too much," he muttered. "She has resources and contacts. She could find out who that kid is and where he came from." The third, called El Mono, slapped the table impatiently. "If that kid talks, our whole plan goes to hell. And if the nurse decides to cooperate with the authorities, everything leaks. We can't allow that." El Rey straightened his shirt and looked at his men. "What do you propose?" he asked coldly. La Sombra scanned the room, gauging reactions. "We start with a warning call to the nurse," he suggested. "Let her know we're watching. But if she doesn't back down, we remove her from the equation." "Remove her how?" El Mono pressed. "Kill her." A heavy silence fell. El Rey leaned on the table and thought for a moment. "First, monitor her house," he ordered. 3 masked men should watch her coming and going, learn her schedule. Then we decide whether to interview her or eliminate her." El Mono grinned cruelly. "I can handle a personal errand. No one will suspect me." La Sombra shook his head. "No. We need a clean plan. People talk if they see gunfire in the street. Better something quick and quiet inside her house." El Rey nodded slowly. "Fine. She'll get a visit tonight. No one must know where we came from. Bring only what you need. Sidearms, flashlights, and tape. The nurse won't walk away unscathed." A new masked man stepped forward with a canvas envelope. "Surveillance reports," he announced. "We've tracked a black car circling her street and a drone patrolling the area." El Rey straightened and looked at his men with satisfaction. "Perfect. Everything's set. Tomorrow we'll confirm our kind nurse is playing dumb. If not, we silence her." At that moment, a nearby shredder snarled to life, and a red light blinked on a monitor. Drone footage from earlier showed Lara spotting the camera and moving away quickly, as if she knew she was being watched. El Rey smiled without emotion. "Looks like we've given her reason to worry," he remarked. "So be it." He then looked toward the door and called out in a loud voice, "Get the trucks ready. We move at dusk." The men turned, grabbed their leather jackets, and headed for the exit, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. The decision was made. Lara Montes would become the cartel's direct target. Slowly and silently, under the cloak of dawn, the 3 trucks roared to life in the cartel's old warehouse yard. Their low beams swept the dusty ground, briefly illuminating the hardened faces of the gunmen. In the lead truck, El Mono, adjusted his balaclava as he checked the pistol at his hip. "Everyone ready?" he whispered in a deep voice. A man laughed dryly. "Ready, boss." "No one's stopping us," he replied, resting a shotgun behind the seat. In the second truck rode La Sombra and 4 others. He stared out the rear window at the sandy road winding through agave and prickly pear. With a nod, he motioned the driver to turn on the clandestine radio. "Channel 1 to all units. Keep quiet until we're in position. We don't want any alarms raised." In the third vehicle, a rookie gripped his rifle with trembling hands. Beside him, La Pantera, a woman with a cold, sinister gaze, nudged him. "Relax, chickadee," she sneered. "No one will give you a second look if you do your job." The rookie swallowed hard, trying to mirror their confidence. The trucks rolled forward in a caravan, spaced 20 meters apart to avoid an ambush wiping them all out at once. The path was silent and dusty. Only the crunch of tires on gravel broke the night stillness. From afar, the town looked like faint yellow lights against white walls. Tile roofs traced the starry sky, and the breeze carried the scent of dry earth and burning wood. Each gunman knew that in a few hours they'd be inside Nurse Montes's house. Yet few understood why her name drew such interest. "Why all the fuss over this woman?" the rookie whispered. "They say she's just a nurse." La Sombra turned and sneered at him. "Because Nurse Montes got more attention than a retired general, chickadee. If she found out anything about our wounded kid," he nodded toward the front, "she could learn where we stashed the shipment." In the lead truck, El Mono raised his hand, signaling the motorcycle escort. 2 riders roared up alongside the convoy on the road's shoulder. "No one falls behind," El Mono ordered. "We've got 30 minutes to reach the target. After that, every second counts." The caravan turned left, entering a track lined with shrubs and twisted mesquite trees. Dust clouds rose around the trucks, disappearing into the darkness. No one used high beams. The full moon was enough to guide them. Every driver stayed focused. One slip could ruin the entire plan. Breaking through the foliage, the first truck came into view of Lara's home. Her small house sat dark, its jasmine vines shadowing the facade. La Pantera leaned forward to peer. "There it is," she whispered. "Hard to see with just low beams." El Mono nodded. "Good. In 10 seconds, spread out around the house. Remember, total silence. Don't raise suspicion." In the second truck, La Sombra reviewed their formation. 3 at the front door, 2 at the side window, 1 at the rear. They carried small flashlights, knives, tape, and silenced pistols. The mission had to be quick and clean. "When you go in, don't shoot at the first sound," he warned. "Move slowly, subdue the nurse, and get out before anyone screams. If things go sideways, improvise." The rookie gripped his rifle tighter, swallowed again, and muttered, "Hope this is over soon." In the tail truck, the rest loaded their weapons carefully, ears tuned to the slightest noise. They knew that, once they stepped out, the night could erupt in gunfire. When all vehicles stopped a few meters from Lara's entrance, El Mono dropped his hand and softly gave the command, "Move in," fast and silent. The doors opened without a creak. The gunmen filed out in single file, faces covered, pistols raised. Tension cut through the air. In the deep silence of dawn, only their muted footsteps on dusty ground could be heard. They halted just steps from the front door. La Sombra glanced at the window beside the entrance. "It's dark." "Perfect," he noted. And so, hearts pounding like invisible drums, they began the final stretch toward Nurse Montes's house, ready to carry out the cartel boss's orders. Lara was resting in the darkness of her living room when the hush of dawn was shattered by a metallic purr. She slammed off the salt lamp and held her breath, keeping still so no one would hear. In the dim light, her eyes adjusted to the shadows. Long shapes outlined the furniture, and the front door was barely visible. Pressed against the wall, she heard a second engine, closer this time, then a third low hum. At least 3 vehicles. Silently, she slid across the threadbare rug. With her left hand, she brushed the grip of her small pistol hidden behind a sofa cushion. In her right, she grabbed her old tactical wristwatch, a relic from tougher times, and activated its silent stopwatch. She hit 0 and tucked it back away. She needed to time every second precisely. A faint echo of footsteps muffled by dirt drifted in through the side window. Someone was moving along the outer wall. Lara stepped back and, barely moving her lips, flipped the voice switch on her military radio. A whisper crackled in her earpiece. "It's Marco. Do you read me?" "Loud and clear," she replied. "They're in low beams, moving in a group of 8. I hear bikes behind them." She tucked the radio away and switched on her tactical flashlight in infrared mode. Her house had been prepped with reflective paint at key spots for guidance. She aimed toward a corner marked by strips she'd placed days before, spotting the side door into the yard. That would be her first line of defense. A gust stirred the curtain, and a dry creak sounded near the main door. The drone buzzed overhead again, brushing the roof, its software mixed with the distant growl of engines. Lara held her breath, calculated distances in her mind, and ran through her plan. Open the door, toss the homemade smoke grenade she'd made from powdered, rusted scalpel bits, block their view, then fall back into the short hallway. On her makeshift stool, a toolbox she'd turned into a seat, lay several items: a kitchen knife, a heavy electrical cable coil, and a hardened silicone tube. Each had its purpose. If they forced entry, she'd use the knife up close, the cable to bind them, and the silicone to seal any cracks of light if she needed more darkness. It was a living trap, one she'd designed herself. A louder thump hit the main door. Through the wood came low voices and the jingle of weapons. Lara clenched her jaw and glanced at the window. She saw 3 masked figures pacing alongside the opposite wall. Their flashlights cut weak beams that couldn't overwhelm her infrared vision. "Ready for the next step," she murmured. "Marco, stand by." Her earpiece blinked, and a cold voice instructed. "On signal, launch the smoke grenade. Then be careful. The bathroom door is trapped." Lara closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them with resolve. Her body, trained for chaos, tensed with contained energy. Every muscle knew its role. In one smooth motion, she unhooked the grenade from her belt, placed it in her palm, and pulled the pin the instant she heard the first kick against the wood. The grenade's muffled blast filled the room with greenish smoke. Light faded to near nothing. Lara dove for the corner, drew her knife from its sleeve, and sliced through the security cable holding down the trapdoor in the floor. She took a deep breath and, without hesitation, dropped into the shallow pit she dug under the carpet. Hidden there, she heard confused shouts, sharp gunshots, and the pounding of boots on the false floor. Outside, the gunmen's voices blended with clipped commands. "Move in! She's in here! Watch out for that nurse!" Lara gritted her teeth and prepared for her next move. The night was just beginning, and she was ready for anything. Lara held her breath as she felt the impact against the front door. The dry crack of splintering would echo through the house. For an instant, the homemade grenade smoke still seeped through the gaps, mixing with dust from the floor. Then a roar of muffled voices, short, rough orders, announced the next move. From her hideout in the floor pit, Lara peered through narrowed eyes. Through the lingering smoke, she made out blurry shapes bursting into the living room. At least 6 armed men emerged like ghosts. Dark helmets, balaclavas, and light vests. One guy, holding a flashlight, peeled away the tape over the lock with a twist. Another kicked the broken door with his boot, while the rest advanced with guns raised. Lara's heart pounded, but her face stayed still. She had faked vulnerability, and now she'd reinforce that impression. Staying motionless, She let one intruder step into the false hallway first, his boots sending up a puff of dust. She heard him right above her and uttered a muffled sob. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm just a nurse. I don't know anything." Her plea drew their attention. They halted abruptly, the smoke still swirling around them, and exchanged glances. The operations leader, El Mono, raised a hand and stepped forward into the main room. "Quiet," he ordered in an authoritative tone. "Get on the floor and don't make any sudden moves." Lara complied, crawling until she knelt with her hands up and gaze lowered. Her eyes, glassy with feigned fear, searched the ceiling shadows. One man pressed a pistol, but against her chest. "Show me your hands," he hissed. She obeyed and silently counted her attackers. 7 in all. She noted their vests, profiles, and weapons: 3 silenced pistols, 2 short rifles, and 2 sawed-off shotguns. She filed that info away for her counterattack plan. El Mono shone his flashlight on her face. "Where are the hospital keys?" he demanded, trying to sound imposing. Lara whimpered and shook her head. "I have no idea. Please, I'm alone here." La Pantera, one of the gunmen, hurried over and shone her light on the side table. Amid scattered objects, they found Lara's nurse's bag and her tactical watch sitting atop some papers. La Pantera grabbed the bag and opened it. "Let's see what we've got here," she muttered. While they rifled through pockets and envelopes, Lara let her shoulders tremble slightly. Her fingers brushed the kitchen knife hidden at the table's edge, ready for her next move. In a rough, broken voice she pleaded, "Please, you won't find anything important." Suddenly, one rifleman stepped toward the bookshelf, displacing picture frames and books. As he bent, his elbow knocked the salt lamp, which crashed to the floor with a dull thud. Glass shards scattered everywhere. The noise drew the closest 3 men's attention. "Careful," El Mono barked. "Someone's looking for something." Exactly the moment Lara had waited for arrived. As the smoke cleared and the false hallway's outline sharpened, she let out a sudden swoon and collapsed onto the carpet. El Mono raised his gun to shoot, convinced she'd fainted. In one swift motion, Lara drew the knife with a flick of her wrist and sprang up behind a column. Her counterattack was lightning fast. She slashed the calf of the man in front, twisted his arm in a reverse grip, and sent him stumbling. Without dropping the knife, she pivoted on her heel and smashed La Pantera in the jaw with the handle. The woman's flashlight clattered to the floor, and she reeled back in dazed pain. Shouts and sharp gunshots echoed off the walls. The rest of the attackers realized something was horribly wrong. La Sombra shouted orders. "Hit the deck! Take cover!" But Lara had already vanished behind the columns and raced for the interior hallway, leaving 2 incapacitated men in her wake. Each determined step rang out. She had just struck the first blow. Lara stayed hidden in the pit beneath the rug, holding her breath while footsteps and smoke-thickened voices moved above. Each sound suggested a possibility. One man stepping quietly, another cursing the dark. Carefully, she set her hand on the pit's top panel and slid it just enough to peek out unseen. A narrow slit gave her a view of the shadowed room. She paused to count. 7 attackers. 2 knelt, rifling through drawers and shelves. 3 others covered the front entrance and main window. An 8th man stood guard at the back door to the yard, flicking his flashlight on and off in short bursts, brushing its beam along the walls. They carried mixed weapons: 3 suppressed pistols, 2 short rifles, a pair of sawed-off shotguns, and several knives at their belts. All wore balaclavas and light vests. Lara breathed steadily, her back pressed to the damp wood of the pit. Heat rose off her body, but her mind worked with cool, military focus. She matched each weapon to its likely role. Pistols for quick close shots, suppressed rifles for controlled, quiet fire, shotguns for breaching doors. If she exploited a lapse, It would be easiest to disarm the one least expecting it. Beside her lay a kitchen knife wrapped at the handle with tape, a coil of heavy electrical cable, and a small metal tube she could use as a baton. Improvised, yes, but effective. She mapped the entry routes. The front door, the side window, the rear door to the yard. The smoke cut visibility, yet the house favored her. Narrow routes, short hallways, terrain she knew by heart. From her hide, she heard El Mono, agitated. Split the house in two. One team through the front, the other through the window passage. Leave no corner unchecked. The order rippled in murmurs. In the confusion, Lara updated each enemy's position and sketched the room in her head. The sofa, 2 center columns, the coffee table, and a side passage where she'd begin her play. Her plan: keep feigning weakness, then strike selectively. Use the cable to trap one man in the passage, the tube to jam the rear door briefly and block reinforcements. The knife was last resort. Among the attackers, La Pantera moved with confident purpose, hunting for hiding spots. Lara studied her. Reinforced vest, solid build. If they met, it had to be quick and decisive. The rifleman at the window signaled the others that the area looked clear. "Nobody here," he whispered. "Move into the passage." At that cue, another gunman eased the window open and climbed inside. His flashlight cast a brief flare toward the corner where Lara hid. She seized the moment. She slid out the cable, stretched it across the passage, anchored one end to a heavy piece of furniture, and kept the other coiled in her hand, ready to snap it tight. The man advanced, confident. The instant his boot hit the marked spot, something snared his leg. He stumbled, clawed at the loop, and went down. His weapon clattered to the floor. A clean, hard strike with a metal tube to the nape of his neck dropped him cold. The noise drew 2 more men, who rushed the passage with pistols raised. Lara crawled from the pit to the nearest column, knife in hand, feigning a clumsy, frightened lurch. "Don't hurt me," she cried, voice shaking as if disoriented. They closed in single file. Mistake. In one motion she pivoted, drove the knife into the first man's thigh, and sent him staggering with a strangled cry. At the same time she snapped her knee up and kicked the second in the stomach, knocking him off balance. Both fell in a heap, shouting in pain. Lara didn't wait. Using the closeness to her advantage, she slid the knife away, dragged the first man into the passage, and left his limp body as a barrier for the next group. Then she sprinted for the rear door, where the guard grappled with the tube jam, trying to free his rifle. She slid behind him, slammed him into the frame, and cracked him on the neck. His pistol hit the floor. Lara scooped it up, flicked off the safety, and aimed down the main hallway. She drew a slow breath. 3 attackers down, 2 more disarmed. Her mental map held true. 4 men remained between the living room and side passage. With an enemy pistol in hand, she could stall their push and buy time. With steady calm, she leaned out the rear doorway and shouted, "Don't come closer or I'll shoot." Silence pressed in. Inside, someone sprinted toward the window. Lara squeezed a warning shot. The muzzle flash flared, glass burst into shards, and a man dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder as the rest fell back. She nodded to herself and lowered the weapon. She had surveyed the house, counted the attackers, identified weapons and entry routes, and already neutralized nearly half of them. Next, she'd lock down her position, ping Marco on the radio, and set up Phase 3, closing the net. Lara moved carefully along the side hallway, her back pressed to the cold wall. The hellish creak of wood and the echo of sharp gunfire had faded, replaced by a tight silence. The attackers, thrown off by the first confusion, regrouped near the main room to hunt for her. She held her breath, pulse beating at her temples, and used their laps. 2 men, El Moreno and El Rayo, stepped into the passage to cover the gap at the back door. They walked single file, not knowing Lara was already watching. With a smooth motion, she slid the kitchen knife from the pit into her right hand. She pushed lightly off the frame of the false door and moved after them in silence. El Moreno stopped to call out, "Nothing here. Let's go." El Rayo swept his light. "She's close. May don't fall behind." Lara counted in her head. Exactly 2 at that spot. She closed her eyes a second to focus, replaying close-quarters routines from her days as a colonel. She breathed in. When they switched places, she bent low and, in 2 strides, came up behind El Moreno. With the blade still hidden, her left hand settled on his shoulder and pressed to lock him in place. "Who?" he stammered. "Hey, let me." Her grip tightened, and she drove the knife tip into the back of his neck, precise and sure. His cry cut off to a gasp. His body slumped against the wooden passage. She held his arm to keep him from crashing down and blocking the corridor. Sensing something wrong, El Rayo turned just in time to see Lara behind his partner. His eyes widened. Bloody hell! Before he could react, Lara slid the blade to the side of his neck. One clean, steady cut. He dropped the flashlight with a metallic clatter and clutched at the wound, stumbling back. She released the handle, planted her foot over his knee, and pinned him to the floor so he couldn't recover. The flashlight rolled by her boots, its beam flickering wild shadows on the walls. Lara grabbed the second man by the collar and stared into his dimming eyes. "Quiet," she whispered. "Don't move." He tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. Gently, Lara tipped his chin to his chest to hush him. Then slowly, she slid him toward El Moreno's limp body and moved them both aside so the corridor stayed clear. Without letting fear bite, she rose softly and wiped the knife on the inside of her sleeve, hiding any trace. The passage was clear now, 2 fewer than before. She took a steady breath. Her hands felt slick, but her head stayed cool. The noise had been minimal. Training had taught her to make silent takedowns, every move short and strategic. Back in the living room, she checked that the wall shadows still hid her. The homemade smoke still hung like a thin curtain. She stepped to the front door and nudged the frame with her heel, just enough to test the attacker's attention. Footsteps rushed at once. 3 men ran through the foyer, likely chasing the distant sound. Lara slipped back into the passage, sheathed the knife at her belt, and pulled out the small coil of electrical cable. Without thinking twice, she flung it into the sticky pool of fresh blood on the floor, making a slick trip trap. Then she slid along the wall and tucked herself into a dark corner, eyes fixed on the doorway between the spaces. The 3 gunmen entered carefully, pistols raised, beams cutting the dim. One stepped on the slippery cable and pitched forward, dragging the other 2 down with him. Bodies smacked the floor. The crash broke the tight quiet. Lara stifled a laugh. That was the chaos she needed. As they scrambled up, cursing, she already had the initiative for her next move. In a firm voice, still faking a slight tremble, she called out, "I'm here. Please don't shoot." They bunched together, unaware how many had fallen. Lara drew a long breath and whispered to herself, "2 down. Time for more." With the calm of someone who had taken back control, she began planning her second strike. Lara braced both hands on the back door frame and drew a deep breath. That pool of blood and the bodies on the floor left no doubt. She wasn't just a nurse. As she tightened the cable coil at her belt, a firm, urgent voice came from the far end of the room. "Stop this now," growled El Mono, bursting in with La Sombra through the main hall. Their steps thudded on the wood, each one heavy with authority. Lara looked up carefully from her crouch and watched the leader rip off his balaclava, revealing a weathered face, hard eyes, and old scars. "What kind of trick is this?" he demanded, stepping over the fallen bodies. No simple nurse could have done this. La Sombra followed close, scowling, and pointed at the spent smoke canister and the dismantled traps at the back door. "Something else is going on," he said. This wasn't random. She planned every step. El Mono let out a bitter laugh. Then let's see if she planned for this, he shot back. Lara Montes, come out and face us like the professional you are. Lara raised her voice, calm and steady, using the nearest column to rise without giving away her exact spot. I'm here, she said evenly. I'm not the kind of professional you think. I'm someone you don't want as an enemy. El Mono narrowed his eyes and lifted his pistol. No nurse talks like that, he barked. What training are you hiding? A tense silence followed. The two remaining gunmen kept their weapons up, aimed at the wall where she stood. I trained to save lives, Lara replied without a tremor. But if you force me, I can take yours with the same precision. El Mono's face lost color as he weighed the threat. He stepped forward, careful, measuring the distance. Where did you come from? He asked low. Who taught you to move like this? Lara took one step back, letting the kitchen knife in her right hand show. Years of moving quietly on hostile ground taught her to measure every centimeter. My teachers are gone, she said, lifting her chin. But their lessons live in me. La Sombra cleared his throat and glanced at his boss, aware the balance had shifted. Boss, we should rethink this. If she gets away, she'll call the army or the police. She's not easy to catch. Jaw tight. El Mono nodded slowly. He lowered his pistol a few degrees, almost a sign of respect. Doesn't matter what she is, he muttered. This is our ground. We won't let her live to tell it. Lara gave a small nod and eased an improvised metal baton from behind the column. Its surface flashed in La Sombra's flashlight. Go on, she challenged. Come and get me. Wait, boss, La Sombra said, lifting his voice. Look at this. He crouched by a body and, clearing a slick of blood, uncovered a metal plaque engraved with military insignia. He wiped it on his sleeve and held it up to El Mono. What the hell? El Mono blurted, taking the plaque. Colonel Montes, Special Forces. A nurse who's a colonel? That makes no sense. Lara stood fully now and took a few steps forward, always keeping the knife in view. I never said I was easy to understand, she stated, voice steady. I became who I chose to be. And now, I am who you tried to destroy. El Mono stared down at the plaque, confusion clouding his face. For a moment, his orders seemed to waver. In that brief pause, Lara felt the opening to strike again. But she held, knowing fear of a Special Forces colonel had frozen him before she needed to move. So you're a retired colonel, he muttered. That explains everything we faced here. Lara nodded slowly. You should have known my history before you tried to kill me, she said. Now you know who you're dealing with. The leader slipped the plaque into his jacket and raised his pistol again. Aim steady, resolve renewed. Doesn't matter, he said. Out here, there are no rules. The three men readied themselves for the final clash, fully aware that beneath the nurse's skin beat the heart of a seasoned soldier. Lara stepped back to the corner of the room where an old broom handle rested, its tip worn by use and damp wood. With a quick move, she grabbed it with both hands and braced it against her shoulder, ready to use it as a blocking weapon. To her left, beside a flipped stool, lay the coil of electrical cable she'd prepared. With a sharp tug, she unrolled about 1.5 meters. She watched the attackers trying to recover from their stumble. For men still stood, crowded together, trying to reorganize. You're not human. La Pantera growled through her teeth as she struggled to stand. How? Lara gave a tight smile and raised the pole in front of her chest, guard high. I'm not just any nurse, she said clearly. Now you know. With a firm shove, she drove back the first man who approached with his pistol up. The barrel wobbled in the air and, in that split second, Lara spun the pole like a flagstaff, striking his forearm. A dry crack sounded. The pistol hit the floor. Without missing a beat, She snatched it up with her free hand and fired into the ceiling. The blast made the remaining 3 attackers jump back. Taking advantage of the confusion, she whipped the cable out and tossed it in an arc over the legs of 2 of them. It tangled around their ankles, dropping them hard and leaving them knotted together. It all happened in seconds. One man fought to get free, but the makeshift loop tightened on his pant leg and trapped him. Lara let the pistol go, seized the cable, and, like a fencing line, wrapped it around a gunman's wrist, twisting until he cried out and dropped the knife hanging from his belt. "Enough!" one of the men shouted, hands lifting. "We're the last ones!" Lara lifted the pole with resolve, knowing her will to survive beat their fury. With a quick switch, she shifted the pole to her left hand and held the cable in her right like a whip. She moved in slowly, measuring each step, and when she reached the nearest man, she pressed the cable across his neck, forcing him to his knees. "Don't move another inch," she whispered blade sharp. "You'll regret it." The other 2, still tangled by the cable at their legs and stunned, backed into the wall. La Pantera raised her voice, coughing in the lingering smoke. "Stop, Montes. You don't know who you're dealing with." Lara kept the cable tight and the pole upright, her gaze locked on each of them. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," she replied, "and it won't go worse for you." Just then, a crash at the back door drew every eye. Marco, her radio partner, had arrived right on time with improvised reinforcements. A nearby patrol alerted by the shot, and a couple of brave neighbors shining flashlights inside. El Mono looked around, realizing his men were outmatched and out of options. Lara eased the cable's pressure and lowered the pole to her hip. "Say it now. Do you surrender?" The 4 men traded quick looks. One nodded slowly and rasped, "Yes, we surrender." Lara stowed the cable, picked up the pole, and exhaled in relief. Her muscles stayed tense, alert for any betrayal. She looked over the tied attackers and the neighbors stepping in with care, and felt certain that, on this night of fury and resolve, she had used every tool within reach, knife, pole, and cable, to defend her life and her people's. Lara still had the pole in her hand, and the cable coiled at her belt when a crack of broken would sounded at the front door. A second neighbor, Don Ernesto, the baker who had shared so many laughs with her at the hospital, stumbled in, gripping a small hatchet with a rusty blade. "Lara," he gasped, "are you all right? I heard shots and shouting. I thought I could help." She tensed, knowing a civilian in the middle of a fight made everything harder. Keeping her voice steady, she raised a hand. "Careful, Don Ernesto. There are armed men inside." But it was too late. From the far end of the hall, through the lingering smoke, La Pantera's rough voice rose. "A straggler! Grab him!" 2 gunmen Lara had thought out of action lurched up. One, wounded in the arm, leveled a pistol at Don Ernesto. "Freeze! Don't move!" The hatchet clattered to the floor. The baker lifted his hands, shaking, and stepped back until his shoulders hit the wall. Lara hesitated a second, eyes locked on her neighbor. She drew a breath, held down the fear, and lifted the cable. "Don't touch him," she ordered firm. El Mono leaned into view from the main hall, scowling at the baker. "Who's this old man? Part of the party?" El Rayo, still woozy from the cut, staggered closer. "No, just a neighbor who tried to help," he said. Lara took a few steps forward, placing herself between Don Ernesto and the attackers. She set a hand on the baker's shoulder. "Take the hatchet and wait here behind the column," she told him. "Don't move." Don Ernesto nodded, eyes wide, and crouched by the load-bearing pillar to the dining room. Lara stood in the middle of the corridor, tall, breathing evenly. She knew that if they took a hostage, the cartel would use him against her. She had to protect him as part of her own plan. El Mono lowered his voice wary. "Well, Nurse Montes, what do we do with him?" Lara fixed her stare on the leader. "He's innocent. He's done nothing. If you attack with him here, you lose. Silence swelled through the house. The beams, the hanging dust, and the strained voices holding their breath. At last, La Pantera cleared her throat. "He can stay for now," she said. "But don't try anything." Lara nodded, eased the cable into her belt, and went to Don Ernesto. She patted his shoulder gently and whispered, "Keep low, and if anyone asks, say I saw you fall." He muttered under his breath and leaned the hatchet against the wall, out of reach. Lara's heartbeat thudded in her ears. Protecting a hostage raised the stakes. She returned to the center of the corridor, the pole resting at her side, and met El Mono's eyes. "Are we done?" she asked calmly. "Or do you want to keep playing?" El Mono studied her, weighing his options. La Sombra stepped in to whisper at his ear, "We're at a disadvantage. 6 men down and a hostage. We should pull back." The leader nodded, resigned. "We withdraw. For now." He turned to Lara. "This isn't over." With that warning, he pivoted and began ordering the retreat. The 4 remaining gunmen hauled themselves up, gathered their weapons, and slipped out the way they had come, leaving Lara and the baker in a house buzzing with leftover noise and severed tension. Lara waited a few more seconds, making sure the last engine died outside, then went to Don Ernesto. "You okay?" she asked, pulse still racing. He nodded, voice unsteady. "I think so. Thank you, Lara. I thought it was over." She gave him a restrained smile and set a hand on his shoulder. "It's over for now. Help is on the way." She looked toward the front door, where a wash of red and blue light began to bleed through. At last, reinforcements were reaching the edge of the street. Lara exhaled with relief and looked back to her neighbor. "Come on, let's go to the yard. You'll be safer there." Lara backed into a corner of the room, her spine against the cracked wall. Before her, chaos reigned. Bullets had chewed the window frames, exploding the glass into 1,000 shards that crunched underfoot. A shelf board lay broken on the floor, piles of books scattered in every direction. The air still smelled of gunpowder and heavy smoke. A few meters away, La Pantera was trying to reload after firing at where Lara had been hiding. Beside her, El Mono swung his rifle like a forged iron bar, hunting for a solid target. A third gunman, El Chino, crouched behind an overturned cabinet, aiming with his flashlight and a suppressed rifle. "Come out!" El Mono shouted. "You know we won't let you escape." Lara closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting the echo settle in her mind. She counted their steps, 2 pushing up the center, 1 circling left. She drew a breath and snapped the broom handle hard. "Here!" she yelled, bringing it down on the coffee table. "Come if you dare." La Pantera fired on reflex, the muzzle flash flaring like a sudden flame that lit the room. A ceramic lamp burst, wood splinters leapt, and Lara felt the floor vibrate under her feet. She stepped back, dodging flying glass. As La Pantera reloaded again, Lara sprinted to the center column and, with a pole, knocked over the toppled lamp beside her, building a quick barrier of broken ceramic and stacked books. The intruders halted, showered in dust and sharp shards. "Damn it!" El Chino snapped. "She's playing with us." Lara didn't answer. She pushed off the column and, gripping the pole in both hands, swung it like a cudgel. She drove at La Pantera, who barely got her pistol up. The pole smashed against the pistol's frame, throwing the shot into the ceiling where tiles cracked and clattered down. At that moment, the difference in weapons vanished. Lara knocked the pistol from La Pantera's hand and, with a quick twist, sent it skittering to the floor. She jumped on it and stamped, shattering the grips and scattering metal pieces. La Pantera stumbled back, a hand to her face where she'd hit on the fall. El Mono lunged from the right, firing short bursts that chewed the wood behind Lara. She dropped the pole, spun, and whipped up the cable coil. With a snap, she looped it around the leader's wrist and yanked, wrenching the rifle free. She heard the cable hiss through the air. With a hard pull, the rifle slammed into the opposite wall and jammed between a splintered plank. El Mono grunted in pain and roared. He twisted to break free, but the line only bit tighter. Lara stepped in, unwavering. "Careful," she warned. "Next time I won't be so gentle." Meanwhile, El Chino tried to flank her, crawling through the debris. Lara caught the glint of his barrel edging past a cabinet. She drew in breath and slid back just as the shot cracked behind her, knocking plaster from the wall and brushing her shirt with its passing wind. Fast as a reflex, she wheeled and leveled the cable toward El Chino. "Stop!" she ordered, voice clipped. Surprised, he lifted his hands and tried to rise. Lara snapped the line tight and jerked. He toppled into the cabinet's edge and slid, wedged under the wheels of an old rolling unit. Rifle still in hand, but no control over it. She didn't waste a second. Lara dashed to where La Pantera had recovered, smashed a blow to the leg with the pole, and dropped her again. Then she aimed the metal tip of the pole at El Mono, and let the cable fall to the floor like a dead snake. "Stand down, or you'll regret it," she roared. The last man standing, El Chino, wrenched himself free and backed toward the front door. Lara followed close, step steady, until he yanked it open and bolted into the night. A burst of outside light flooded the room, signaling more reinforcements arriving. Engines and sirens shattered the final tension. Breathing hard but upright, Lara raised the pole and the cable like a banner of victory. At the doorway, neighbor Don Ernesto and Marco stood ready, watching for her signal. Lara breathed hard as the last gunman fled through the front door, leaving the muffled racket of the fight behind. With the pole still in her hand and the cable loose at her side, she peeked into the hallway. Silence returned to the house, broken only by her own breathing and the distant hum of incoming backup. Without wasting a second, she moved quickly toward the back door. Don Ernesto, shivering by the dining room column, watched her, hardly believing he was still alive. Lara gave him a gentle signal. "Come slowly. Don't run." He nodded, the hatchet shaking in his hand. At the patio door, she turned the knob carefully and pushed. The wood creaked. Outside, the night was calm. A starry sky, a soft wind in the bougainvillea, and fine dust settled after the fight. The quiet felt like a gift. "Easy," Lara whispered. "I'll take you somewhere no one will find you until this is over." Don Ernesto followed, unsteady, while she closed the door behind them and slid the bolt. She pointed to a corner near the tool shed, hidden by mint bushes. "There," she said. "Get behind those water barrels and stay still." The baker shuffled quickly, careful not to slip on the dust. He crouched beside the barrels, pulled the hatchet to his chest like a charm, and pressed it there. Lara leaned in, patted his shoulder firmly, and spoke low. "Good. Stay here. No noise. Don't move until I say." He murmured a faint yes, bowed his head, and closed his eyes. Lara stepped back, checking that the bushes hid him completely. Straightening, she took a small packet of fine powder from her belt, the last of her homemade smoke mix. Gently, she scattered a broken line of powder along the outer wall, just across from the hallway window. The plan was to use the glow of enemy flashlights so the powder would stir into small smoke wisps and cut visibility. She clicked her radio and whispered, "Marco, I've moved the neighbor to the patio. He's safe behind some barrels. I'm going to stir up a bit of confusion for whoever's left." "Copy," he replied. "I'll cover from the street. Climb to the window when you're set." Lara allowed herself a small smile at their plan, scanning the dark. Carefully, she slipped back to the battered front door. From her pocket she took an old hand torch. No battery, turned into a reflector. She set it at the base of the door, its head angled upward toward the ceiling. If a gunman returned, it would look like someone was still inside. Back in the patio, she switched off her own light and edged to the window that opened onto the inner corridor. She leaned and saw the hallway in dim gray, tiny dust flecks floating in the light slice from the broken frame. She placed a small oil bottle from her belt and poured it over the powder line. Oil mixed with powder would make a murky glow when light hit it, perfect for confusion and distraction. She eased back to the side wall and whispered, "Marco, almost ready." "Perfect," he answered. "When you see movement, trigger the flashbang." She nodded, stayed calm, and meantime switched on a spare torch from the shed, aiming its beam right at the oil line. She knew the bright shine, combined with the uneven smoke, would disorient anyone trying to enter. In the distance, gravel crunched. Two figures moved along the passage, leaning on their flashlights. Their voices were rough. "You sure?" one asked. "Yeah, the window light shifted," the other said. "She must still be here." At that exact moment, Lara pressed the button on the flashbang in her left hand. A blue burst flooded the corridor, mixing with the oily, dusty haze. The thunderclap rolled through the house. A shout followed. "Damn it!" one intruder barked. "I can't see." The second slipped and fell in the slick mix. Lara turned the window latch, slid inside fast, and barred the shutters from within. With an extra bolt she'd set earlier, she locked the window, then killed the lamp to deepen the darkness. Inside, the gunman's footsteps staggered in confusion. Thumps on walls, curses, and the drip of oil. Lara pulled another smoke charge from her belt and tossed it toward the front door. It hit with a thud, and in seconds a thick, acrid cloud rose. As the smoke grew, she pressed against the corridor wall and covered her mouth with a scarf. She drew a deep breath. On the exhale she heard them falter. Two sharp shots cracked behind the shutters, followed by the rising echo of engines and sirens from the street. In a steady voice, "Marco, they're here. I'm ready." Outside, Marco leaned to the window and fired a signal pistol. Two bright flares that lit uniform silhouettes. Boots pounded and orders shouted on the other side of the front door. Lara readied herself for the reinforcements to enter, knowing that after this confusion, her position would be secured, and control would be in her hands. Lara used the few seconds of silence to switch off every light in the house. With firm motions, she flipped each switch in the main hallway, the living room, and the dining room, and even pulled the foyer lamp's fuse, plunging the interior into near-total darkness. Outside, the police siren grew closer, but inside, the air was heavy with tension. She took her tactical flashlight again, now fitted with a red filter that cast a faint, unsettling glow. Back in the side hallway, she pulled from her pocket a couple of small tins packed with pins and rusty screws. Homemade traps she'd rigged from parts of an old blender motor. She scattered them in 3 spots: beside the makeshift stairs to the loft, in front of the back door, and around the broken window frame. Each tin had a bit of hardened silicone so it would pop under a boot, making noise and piercing soles. Meanwhile, in the foyer, El Chino and La Pantera moved with care, guided by jittering beams. They didn't know if Lara was still inside or had given up. All they saw were dancing shadows and a flash of red that vanished when a corridor turned. Every step on the wooden floor creaked and led them toward a trap. El Chino stepped on a scattered screw without noticing. He felt it crunch under his sole, then a dull pop as the tin burst. He froze, swore, grabbed his foot, and bent over, leaving a trail of bright metal. From the dark, Lara watched the second attacker stumble on a pin. A cool satisfaction pricked inside her. The traps didn't just blind, they made each step a doubt. Silently, she eased into the next room and, steady as ever, stretched a length of electrical cable across thigh height at the doorway. Anchored to the broken stair rail, it would snare anyone who came through. She had just set the last trap when muffled voices sounded through the wall. "Damn it!" La Pantera hissed. Can't see a thing. Quiet, El Mono rasped. Track her by sound. No one goes alone. One advances, one covers the rear. Lara smiled to herself. The plan was working. Confusion would force them to come one by one, lose formation, and forfeit their numbers. Carefully, she moved to the center of the house and started the stopwatch on her tactical watch. Every second mattered. Then she pressed her radio. Marco, timing 3 minutes of darkness and traps. Be ready. Copy, he said. I'm coming in through the back window. I'll cover you from there. Lara stowed the radio and took stock. Broken glass, flipped furniture, splinters, dust. Every corner could hide her, or block them. She made sure no stray light would give her away. A hard thump on the next wall marked the first intruder's arrival. El Chino, one leg hurt, clutched his ankle and panted. Lara Montes, he muttered. This isn't worth it. Silence held. Hidden behind the fallen bookcase, Lara held her breath. When he hesitated, maybe thinking of backing off, she appeared behind him, red beam in his face and cable in hand. Hesitating now? She asked softly. Better stay where you are. El Chino lifted his hands, startled, and stepped back, bumping the cabinet. Lara closed the distance in 2 strides, grabbed his collar, and shoved him against the wall. Do not come back in here, she warned, or you'll regret it. With a clean release, she slipped back into the dark. The first strike had worked. No shots fired, another enemy neutralized. Silence reclaimed the house, broken only by El Chino's distant groans and La Pantera's unsteady steps beyond the front door. Lara tightened the cable at her belt and prepared her next move. In this deep darkness, her skill at moving unseen and her homemade traps would give her the final edge. Lara stayed absolutely silent for a few seconds, listening to the uneven drum of scrambled footsteps in the main hallway. Darkness was still her ally. Whenever El Mono or another gunman flicked on a flashlight, the red beam only lit dust motes and splinters hanging in the air. Carefully, she slid toward the side room, keeping her shoulder to furniture edges and walls, using the red filter on her tactical torch so she wouldn't stand out in white light. Her ears picked up a faint groan. La Pantera, dragging one leg and feeling along the far side of the room with her right hand. Lara held her breath, measured the distance, about 4 steps, and moved without a sound. She pulled from her belt a looped length of electrical cable and, staying low, edged to the partly open doorway. With a sharp twist of her wrist, she cast the cable over La Pantera's neck and yanked back. The line snapped tight like a whip, dropping the attacker face first with a choked moan. Without waiting, Lara eased the loop down and hauled the woman by the collar into the shadow behind the toppled bookcase. Dazed, the attacker struggled, but it was no use. Lara slipped the cable around the gunwoman's left wrist and pinned her forearm with her heel to lock her in place. In a whisper, she said, "Leave and don't come back." Face to the floor, the woman could only groan. Lara gave one last shove, sliding her behind the stacks of books, safely out of any hostage or backup's line of fire. Her tactical watch showed perfect timing. Just over 2 minutes since she'd set the traps. Time to hunt the next one. She crossed the main room unhurried, using the overturned furniture as cover. On the far side, El Mono moved toward the dining room, jittering beams washing over family photos on the wall. With one hand, Lara drew the worn broom handle she still had at her waist and locked in a steady grip. "She won't get away," the leader muttered. "That smoke won't stop us." Lara hid a smile and stepped out from behind the column, pole raised, appearing right in front of him. El Mono jolted, lowered his weapon for a heartbeat, and fell straight into the perfect trap. Before he could react, she drove the poles but into his chest, shoving him back 2 steps. Then, with a clean turn, she raked the grip across his right wrist like a baton and wrenched the pistol free. The accidental shot cracked into the dining room mirror, exploding it into glittering shards. The pistol skittered away. Lara snatched it mid-bounce. El Mono groaned, a hand to the side of his head where the strike had landed true. "Surrender?" Lara asked, leveling his own gun at him. "You still have time." The leader rasped, rage and shock hollowing his face. "I'll never surrender." She pressed a little more on the trigger, just a warning. The brief flash thundered through the house. A distant cry, La Pantera or El Chino, maybe, told her panic was setting in. Lara tucked the stolen pistol into her waistband and, without taking her eyes off El Mono, thumbed her radio. "Marco, I need entry. 3 more down." "On my way," came the reply. With a push, she drove the leader back to the wall and let him slide to his knees on the carpet of shattered glass. She set the pole by her boot and used the cable to lash his injured wrist to the post of the makeshift stair rail, knotting it tight. "Now we're finished," Lara murmured. Right then, another shot cracked from the hallway, and a last attacker staggered in, a trembling revolver in his hand. Lara turned smoothly, lifted the red torch and El Mono's pistol, and aimed. "Don't move," she ordered. Seeing he was outmatched, the man dropped the gun, raised his hands, and edged toward the front door. Lara swept the beam over him, catching the panic on his face. "Outside. Stay there. Don't come back." He nodded clumsily and disappeared past the threshold. Outside, police and soldiers were already taking the street, pushing in with shields and lights. Lara drew a long breath, let the pole fall, and holstered the cable. She had taken them one by one, stealth and homemade traps winning the fight without a single shot of her own. She turned to El Mono, blood dripping from his bound wrist, and told him, voice firm, "It's over." And with that, the house settled into the taut quiet of imminent victory. Lara leaned against the frame of the heavily barred window, feeling the last gunshots fade with each passing second. Outside, a police siren drew closer, mixing with the low chatter of soldiers by the front door. With steady hands, she slid the tactical radio from her belt and pressed the button. "Marco, do you read?" she whispered. "Marco here, go ahead," came her old partner's voice, a slight tremor of fatigue betraying his own tension. "I've neutralized the last attackers and secured the leader," Lara said quietly. "I need reinforcements inside the house, main hallway. There's a civilian in the backyard. I placed him behind some barrels." "Copy," Marco answered. "I've got 2 patrol cars on the street and a pair of soldiers on standby. I'll come in through the back door and cover your right flank." Lara nodded, even if the radio couldn't catch it. "Good," she whispered. "Once you're inside, aim your light at the ceiling and tell Sergeant Bravo to focus warning fire down the main hallway. With that, we can extract the leader and evacuate the neighbor without casualties." "On it," Marco said. "Give me 2 minutes." Lara put the radio away and studied the dark corridor. She paused a few seconds. There wasn't much left to do inside, but she couldn't relax. Training had taught her that a single lapse could cost a life. Dropping her guard, even for a moment, could be fatal. In a low voice, she called inward, "Heads up, friendlies incoming." She moved toward the front door in silence, careful not to step on glass or catch a foot on fallen beams. Each time a shadow slid under the siren's light through the window, Lara stopped, assessed, and moved again. In the center of the room, a thin strip of light slipped under the back door. Marco was about to enter. She peered through a side gap and saw him slide into the foyer, wearing a ballistic vest and a helmet with night optics. "Marco," Lara whispered. "Go light." Marco raised his tactical flashlight and aimed at the main hall ceiling. A bright beam bounced off the wood above and spilled into every corner. At the same time, a squad of soldiers and police pushed in behind him, shields up and sidearms ready. "Identify yourselves," a sergeant boomed, his voice rolling like thunder through the empty room. Lara stepped forward and, looking to the leader tied by the stairs, shouted, "Target here! Secure him and move him to the yard." 2 officers rushed in, freed the leader from the post, and guided him out. Sam and Marta, 2 recon soldiers, stepped up to hold him without causing further harm. Lara followed them out and, in the foyer, took a deep breath. Outside, under the flashing lights, Don Ernesto emerged from behind the barrels, legs shaking. Marco went to him and walked him out with care. "You're all right now, Don Ernesto," he said. "You're safe." The neighbor crossed himself, tears in his eyes, and nodded gratefully at Lara. She offered her hand, helped him up, and led him toward a cruiser waiting with blankets and water. Inside, the last gunman had been subdued without more shots. Lara stood alone in the foyer, lit by police floods. She watched Marco and Sergeant Bravo trade a quick order, and at last, let the radio hang loose. "Good work, Colonel," Marco said, tapping her shoulder lightly. "Not many could handle this so well." Lara managed a tired smile and, for the first time in hours, let the edge of adrenaline ease. "Thanks," she whispered, "but we still need to make sure there aren't cartel reinforcements nearby." Sergeant Bravo nodded, scanning the adjoining rooms. "We'll clear the site," he said. "You rest and look after the injured." Lara leaned on the wall, closed her eyes for a moment, then looked at the captured leader being guided toward an arriving DEA unit. She knew she had done her duty. Lara stepped onto the front doorway, just as the last flashes of police flashlights faded on the street. Sergeant Bravo was lining up his men, but in the distance she saw shapes stumbling around the house. The cartel gunmen, hurt and confused, were scattering without any plan. On the left side, 2 of them, El Chino and La Pantera, staggered through the yard, their guns shaking in their hands. El Chino turned toward a broken fence to hide behind a bush, but the rail creaked and gave way under his weight, giving him away. "Freeze!" Lara shouted, raising the rifle she'd taken from El Mono. "Drop the gun or I'll shoot." El Chino stepped back, eyes unfocused, and let the revolver hit the ground with a hard thud. Meanwhile, La Pantera tripped on a branch and fell face first, cursing. "Damn it! This is bad." On the other side, El Moreno and El Rayo had fallen behind. El Moreno tried to crawl along the wall of the house, not noticing the trail of oil and dust shining in a police beam. As soon as he stepped on the slick patch, he slipped and crashed to the ground. El Rayo tried to help him, but lost balance when he stepped on one of the scattered screws in the yard and felt a sharp stab in his soul. He stared at his boot, tried to pull it out, and in that moment Lara moved in quietly and gripped the back of his neck. "Don't move," she whispered. The man swallowed, raised his hands, and gave up. He knew he had no way out. On the south side, a single shot cracked. El Mono, his wrists still wounded, had grabbed a gun and fired into the air in rage and despair. The blast startled everyone. The gunmen, confused, pressed their weapons against their own shoulders, afraid of shooting each other. A police officer seized the moment and shouted, "Surrender now! We've got you surrounded!" Right then, 2 National Guard vehicles rolled up at the far end of the street, blocking escape routes. They deployed with shields and LED lights, moving in formation. Seeing themselves trapped between the house and the uniforms, the gunmen started arguing. "Which way out?" "It's a cordon." El Mono lifted his gun toward his men, trying to command them. "Regroup in the garage." But no one followed. La Pantera stayed down. El Chino clutched his leg, and the others hesitated with their guns pointed at the ground. Total confusion. With steady steps, Lara moved into the backyard and faced El Mono. "Last chance," she ordered. "Drop the gun and walk in, or I swear I'll fire again." El Mono wavered. He looked around. Lara's hard face, the flashlight on her rifle, the police ring closing in. Bitter, He let the pistol fall and raised his hands. A sergeant ran in, scooped up the gun, and tossed it to an officer with zip ties. The gunman's panic turned into instant surrender. El Moreno crawled forward with his hands behind his head. El Rayo dropped his knife. La Pantera stood with help, wincing. No one tried to run anymore. Lara drew a deep breath and looked up at the night sky, feeling both the weight of the night and the relief of a partial victory. Sergeant Bravo came up lightly and set a hand on her shoulder. "Good work, Montes." They gave up without more shots. She nodded and slung the rifle. Far off, the first light of dawn began to color the horizon. The first patrols were taking out handcuffs and searching the detainees, while neighbors stepped from their homes, peeking out with care. Lara felt the weight of the night on her shoulders as she moved through the foyer, watching the leader tied by the makeshift stair. El Mono lifted his gaze, eyes burning with defiance even as blood from his wounded wrist dripped onto the wood. She holstered the borrowed rifle with a sharp click and fixed her eyes on him. "It ends here," she said, firm. He spat on the floor, anger tight in his jaw. "I thought you were weak, a frightened nurse," he sneered. "Turns out you're a warrior." Lara stepped forward, boots crunching over glass. With a quick motion, she untied the knot that held his wrist to the post. El Mono groaned, pushed himself upright, and raised a trembling fist. She stepped back, measuring every centimeter of space. "Come at me if you dare," she challenged, the edge of a kitchen knife showing at her waist. El Mono hesitated, just a fraction. It was enough to bring back the close-quarters drills from her military days. She drew a steady breath and, keeping the knife hidden, closed in calmly. He charged with a raw shout, arm raised to strike. Lara waited, saw the opening, then rolled her hips and slipped aside. In one smooth flow, she wrapped his elbow with the knife's handle and shouldered into him, sending him stumbling back. Using his momentum, she pivoted and drove a knee into his midsection, folding him. With her left hand, she caught his good wrist and, with a hard jerk, wrenched it free of his clenched fist. He dropped to his knees, fighting for balance, pain tightening his face. Lara didn't lower her guard. "Surrender," she commanded. "No one's coming for you." El Mono raised his head, eyes clouded with defeat and fury. "Never," he rasped. Lara stepped back twice and drew the knife in a clean motion. She held it chest high, the blade glinting faintly in the police lights flickering beyond the window. "Then you die here," she whispered, moving one step closer. He lifted his chin, challenge unbroken. "Do it, if you can." She saw the hard shine of metal will in his eyes, the same resolve she knew in herself. Time stretched. She adjusted her grip and raised her arm. El Mono tensed for a last move. But just as the tip reached a breath from his throat, Lara stopped. She lowered the blade. "I don't kill people who've given up," she said, voice cold. "Learn to choose your enemies." She let the knife drop, blade first, to the floor and stepped back twice more. With a fluid motion, she set one leg to his back and shoved, sending him into the wall, then sliding down to the floor. He choked out an insult, then finally a groan of submission. Lara wiped the blood from her improvised knife and slid it back at her waist. Sirens and uniformed voices swelled through the house. She drew a long breath, feeling her pulse begin to settle, and let out a thin, relieved sigh. "It's Feeny," she began, but her voice caught in a brief sob. In that quiet, the night seemed to pause. She, the hidden warrior inside a nurse. He, the fallen leader. The final clash had ended not in death, but in the surrender of a lost soul. Lara stayed still for a few seconds after shoving El Mono against the wall. Her lungs burned. The smell of dust and gunpowder still hung in the room like a veil. The leader was breathing hard, sitting on his side on the floor, hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. He didn't try to stand. He had lost. His swagger was gone, leaving only the tired look of someone who finally knew this house was not his. "It's over," Lara said again, low and firm. El Mono clenched his jaw, glanced at the knife on the floor, then back at her. He lowered his eyes, defeated. Lara stepped back twice, picked up a length of cable lying by the furniture, and tied his wrists in front. No roughness, but no doubt. When she finished, she checked the cut on his other hand. Shallow. The nurse in her had not left. With a strip torn from her own scarf, she stopped the bleeding. "I won't let you bleed out," she said. "But you won't hurt anyone here again." A creak in the hall warned her. La Pantera, limping, came leaning on the wall, eyes unfocused, gun down. He hesitated when he saw her. Behind him, El Chino showed his face, pale, pressing an injured ankle. Outside, engines and voices rose and fell, as if the town breathed with the dawn. The two gunmen looked at each other, lost, with no orders from their boss. The chain of command, that invisible rope, had snapped. "Drop the guns," Lara ordered without yelling. La Pantera let the pistol fall. El Chino dropped his revolver with a tired motion. No one moved. No one wanted to test their luck. Somewhere in the yard, a dog barked twice and went quiet, as if it understood the ending too. "Kneel and lace your fingers behind your neck," Lara said. They obeyed. She walked forward calmly, slid the weapons under the sofa, and tied their wrists with a cord torn from the shredded curtain. She worked fast, hands sure, movements short. Each knot was a choice. Each rap, a promise. A shadow crossed the broken window. One last man, El Rayo, appeared in the doorway, breathing loud. He held a small knife and stared at the leader, as if he still could save him. "Don't," Lara said, without lifting her gun. "Look at me. Don't." The man hesitated. He took one step. Then, like a weak wave breaking, he let the knife fall. His hand shook. He let out a long breath, turned halfway, and ran for the street. No one followed. No one cheered. From the corner came a motorbike's clumsy rev. Then the sound faded between the houses. Another gunman, farther off, fled on foot, stumbling. The night swallowed them without glory. Lara turned back to El Mono. She motioned to La Pantera and El Chino to stay seated. She crouched in front of the leader, held his gaze, and spoke slowly. "You're going to stand up calmly. You'll walk to the threshold. You'll sit there and wait." "Understood." He swallowed. "Understood." Patiently, Lara helped him rise. She guided him to the door, where a gray hint of dawn showed along the tiles. The block looked like a cold-toned photo. Dirt roads, white walls, a fallen bicycle. Some neighbors opened their windows with care. No one shouted. No one clapped. It was a different silence. The silence of people who, after a long time, could breathe again. "Lara!" Marco called from the gate. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she answered. Inside, 2 wounded and 1 surrendered. The rest fled or are out of the fight. Marco nodded and waited at the entrance for her sign. Lara waved for him to hold a moment and turned to the gunman. "Listen," she said. "The night ends here. If anyone runs, it'll be worse. If you stay, you live." No one moved. A prescription slip skated across the floor and stuck to dried blood like a paper white flag. Lara went back in, gathered the guns with a kitchen rag, and stacked them on the broken table. Then she took a pen, miraculously still working, and marked a cross on each pistol to show it was unloaded. A simple act, but it gave her peace. "El Mono, if you try to raise your voice, I'll break it with a look," Marco joked from the doorway with a tight half-smile. Lara almost smiled, but stayed serious. "He won't. He knows he lost." She walked to the yard and bent over Don Ernesto, still curled behind the barrels. "It's over," she whispered. "Come out slowly." The baker stepped out, face wet with sweat and relief. He hugged her for a second, like you hug someone back from far away. Thank you, thank you. Lara gave him a brief squeeze and guided him to the door where he could breathe clean air. She returned inside, washed her hands with bottled water, took a deep breath, and let calm settle in. She looked at the room. Fallen furniture, glass, dust, but also lights slipping through gaps, as if the sun were gathering the pieces to make them whole again. It's over, she repeated, this time to herself, so soft it sounded like a prayer. El Mono bowed his head. La Pantera and El Chino didn't argue. Outside, the beat of coordinated steps came up the street like a tidy tide. The fear that ruled the night began to pull back. The leader had fallen. That was the truth, and with him, the group's will. Those not on the ground had wandered off. There was no fight left to fight. Lara closed her eyes for a second, let her pulse drop, and spread her hands on the broken table, like someone recognizing the end of a storm. The silence that followed fear's collapse was broken by the orderly murmur of boots and radios. First one patrol arrived, then another. Behind them, 2 National Guard trucks and an ambulance from the health center. Red and blue lights washed the street like a flickering ribbon. Lara stepped to the threshold, raised a hand, and calmly pointed out the key spots. Perimeter in an L, she told Sergeant Bravo, sketching a simple map in the air. 1 unit at Don Julio's workshop corner, another behind the church. Don't cross the side yard until I give the all clear. There are homemade traps. Copy, the sergeant replied, turning to his team. Shields up, eyes open. Marco came over in helmet and vest, flashlight in hand. One look at Lara told him the priority. Hostage. Safe, she said. Don Ernesto's in shock but stable. He needs oxygen and water. And someone call his wife. A paramedic ran to the baker. Lara moved 2 steps with her and knelt beside him. Breathe with me, Don Ernesto, she said softly. In through the nose, that's it. Out slowly. You're alive, and you're with me. He nodded, fingers still clenched around the hatchet handle. A soldier gently took it and wrapped it in a blanket. The paramedic set a mask, checked his pulse, and gave a thumbs up. Sat 96, pressure rising, she reported. He'll be fine. Thank you, Lara said, heading back to the door. Inside, the room felt frozen in its own time. Overturned furniture, glass underfoot, the coiled cable like a sleeping snake, dust and smoke stains. El Mono sat under the frame, hands tied in front, eyes down. La Pantera and El Chino stayed still with curtain cord on their wrists. Lara raised her voice clear. Attention, everyone. Entry on the center line. Don't step into the left hallway. Screws and pins there. I'll lead. She went first, careful step by step. With a stub of chalk, she marked small X's on safe boards and drew arrows toward clear zones. She brushed the wall where she'd spread oil earlier and pointed out the shiny film that still fooled the eye. Slippery here. Keep right. The team followed, hugging the shadows Lara knew by heart. One officer opened evidence bags. Another began photographing the unloaded weapons on the broken table. A portable flood filled the room, revealing the edges of each improvised trap. These marks on the pistols? A cop asked. Crosses mean no ammo, Lara said. Check them anyway, prints, serials, everything. In the hall, La Pantera cleared his throat. My leg hurts, he muttered. Lara crouched, tria quick, then glanced to a medic. Contusion, likely a sprain. Compression wrap and transport to the center. Don't cuff in front. Hands behind for safety and movement. The medic nodded. El Chino groaned, moving his ankle. You, ice and a splint, Lara ordered. He goes too. Sergeant Bravo watched from the corner of his eye, impressed by how every instruction braided care with control. He didn't ask where her command voice came from. Not now. It was enough to follow. Marco, Lara said as she walked, I need 2 up on the roof. Pull whatever the drone left. If you find blades or the camera, bag for evidence. On it, he said, veering to the exterior stairs. On the street, neighbors began coming out. Donna Carmen clutched her apron. Father Rubio, pale, murmured a short prayer. Lara stepped forward and spoke in a calm, almost classroom tone. Please stay back from the tape. There'll be noise, but you're safe. If you saw or heard anything, there'll be a reporting table in the square in 20 minutes. Everything will be taken in writing. No one says their name out loud. A young officer, rattled by so many eyes, held out a notebook. What do we put first, boss? Lara looked down and breathed. Securing the area and preserving evidence, she dictated. Time, location, list of recovered weapons, number of injured, hostage status, and notes on possible escape routes. Also note 2 trucks under review 2 blocks north. A short, metallic growl rolled over the roofs. The municipal crane arrived to move a vehicle blocking the ambulance lane. The driver tipped his cap. Where to, nurse? Back door, zigzag in a Z, Lara said. Keep the way clear for medical exits and forensics entry. Marco came back with a clear evidence bag, grim and useful. The drone's camera, broken but intact enough. They had it recording you, he said. SD cards whole. Forensic copy before you open, Lara replied. Forensics on the big table. No one touches it until the Crown's prosecutor arrives. Sergeant Bravo set 2 lines. One for the injured, another for detainees in cuffs. An officer handed out blankets to shivering neighbors. The street, a place of fear hours ago, started to look like a plan. And you? Marco asked quietly beside her. Your forearm's bleeding. She glanced at the thin red line, unbothered. Surface cut. Alcohol gauze done. You look after the town. Marco managed a small smile. The tremor in Lara's hand was slight. More fatigue than fear. She lifted her face to the sky. The pale band of dawn was about to break behind the church. Sergeant, she called. As soon as the prosecutor's here, we start chain of custody. I want each weapon photographed in place, then bagged and numbered. And send 2 patrols to the old warehouse. There may be material or people hiding. Yes, ma'am, Bravo said. And, thank you. Lara didn't answer. She simply moved among the tipped chairs like someone examining a wound that would also heal. The house had survived. Maybe the town would too. As the sky began to lighten, the whole street turned into an orderly grid. Orange cones marked a corridor for ambulances and patrol cars. Neighbors, still in robes and sandals, stayed behind the tape with a mix of fatigue and relief. Lara, her forearm bandaged, gave Bravo a signal. Sergeant, we'll sweep by quadrants, she said. 2 two-person teams to the north, 1 to the old warehouse. Marco, you take point. Copy, Marco replied. Team comb formation. No shots unless they're visibly armed. They moved out at a quick pace. A young officer approached Lara with a notebook. Boss, who do we process first? Priority. Injured under custody, she said. La Pantera, and El Chino to the health center with an escort. The leader in a patrol car with 2 officers, back seat, camera rolling. Note the time. As she spoke, 2 officers loaded El Mono into the unit. Exhausted, he didn't resist. Lara leaned in and spoke without raising her voice. You'll get there alive. If you cooperate, they'll hear you. If you lie, all of this will weigh heavier on you. He said nothing. The door shut, and the cruiser pulled away under flashing lights. At Don Julio's workshop corner, the first 2-person team raised a hand. A man came out of a yard with his hands up, shaking. Don't shoot, he shouted. I'm just the driver. On the ground, Marco ordered. Palms where we can see them. They cuffed him smoothly. On his belt they found a key ring with the crowned scorpion emblem. Lara logged him in the field record. Name and nickname, she asked. Nicholas. Nico. Nico, breathe. We'll go step by step. She noted key details, a short inventory, and arrest location. 2 photos. Evidence bag sealed. The old warehouse team called over the radio. Contact inside. 2 subjects. One with a sawed-off, no shots. They're surrendering. Proceed, Lara said. Bag the weapon. Photos with location and time. Ask forensics to dust the metal doorknob. National Guard soldiers cordoned the church alley. Another gunman tried to cross the roofs. The tiles groaned, and he ended up sitting on the eaves, staring down in panic. Don't jump, an officer warned. Take the ladder. Lara took the loudhailer. Easy, she said. You see how this is. Don't hurt yourself. He obeyed, climbed down clumsily, and let himself be cuffed. A neighbor whispered from a doorway. Is it over? We're getting there, Lara answered with a half-smile. 2 sectors left. The ambulance crew came back with a brief update. La Pantera. Sprain and bruises. El Chino. Ankle in a splint. Stable. Under guard. Good, Lara said. Have the medical examiner note their condition when possible. At the reporting table in the square, the line of neighbors moved in murmurs. An officer took statements patiently. Donna Carmen discreetly passed a note. License plates, approximate time, the direction a truck fled. This helps, Lara said. Thank you for the trust. Soon another radio call. Gray pickup found to the north, no occupants. Inside, 3 phones, a radio, 2 magazines. Tape it off and photograph, Lara said. Check glove box and chassis. No one touches the phones until forensic cloning. A high school kid, backpack on, raised his hand from behind the tape. Ma'am, a nurse, he said shyly. I saw them toss something behind the chapel. Thanks, she replied. Can you point without crossing the tape? He pointed. A forensic tech skirted the edge and lifted a package wrapped in black tape. Fake plates and a notebook of routes. He placed it in a box, photographed, and signed the label. Goes to chain of custody, he confirmed. At last the sun showed, pale yellow, washing the outlines of the houses. The street's sound was different now. Clear radio codes measured steps, kids asking if they could go back in for bread. Don Ernesto, in better spirits, held his wife's hand. She looked at Lara with wet eyes. Thank you for bringing him back. We brought all of us back, Lara corrected gently. You, him, and this place. Marco returned, dusty. At the warehouse, the 2 said they were waiting on radio orders, he reported. Floor marks from big crates. Might have moved product. Photograph tire and shoe prints, Lara ordered. Ask for plaster casts, just in case. And have the prosecutor notify the Provincial Anti-Narcotics Unit. Arrests continued for the next hour. For more, 2 with minor bruises from falls. No shots fired. Officers read rights in clear voices. The detainees nodded. A young officer, finishing a form, exhaled. Never seen people stay this quiet, he said. No shouting. Silence is what you hear when fear lets go, Lara said. Now we have to protect it. With phase 1 complete, Lara gathered Bravo, Marco, and the forensics officer at the broken table in her living room. Their makeshift command post. Summary, she said. Arrests, 9, including the leader. 2 at large. Nicknames identified. Evidence. 8 handguns, 1 shotgun, magazines, phones, drone camera, fake plates, route notebook. Injured. 2 under custody. 2 neighbors with scrapes. Hostage stable. Perimeter holds, Bravo added. National Guard on access points. Western Highway under traffic control. Perfect, Lara said. From now on, we go door to door with respect. No yelling. Announce before entry, and if a neighbor's scared, the paramedic talks to them. We're here to calm, not chase people off. The order spread like a clear whisper. Doors began to open. A boy chased a ball to the edge of the tape, and his mother called him back without scolding. A dog curled in the shade and finally slept, and on Lara's porch, the untouched cup of coffee waited for its moment. "We keep going," she said, with the tone of someone who knows the path. Slow, but steady. As the sun finished climbing behind the church, the town began to step out of their homes like people peeking out after a storm. There was dust in the air, glass crunching under police boots, and the smell of fresh coffee mixing with bandages and rubbing alcohol. Lara, her forearm bandaged, walked to the security tape and paused to look around. There were no cheers, only long sighs, long looks, and hands that trembled bringing a cup to the lips. Donna Carmen came first. She held the tape like an invisible railing and spoke softly so only Lara could hear. "Dear, thank you. I thought we wouldn't see the sunrise." Lara squeezed her hand. "We're here," she said. "We'll keep looking out for each other." Across the street, a group of neighbors gathered around Don Ernesto, now seated with a blanket on his shoulders. His wife smoothed his hair and kissed his damp forehead. "You brought him back," she told Lara, voice breaking. "We owe you a life." "You don't owe me anything," Lara replied. "No one fights alone." Father Rubio walked to the middle of the square with a rosary in his fingers. He stopped in front of Lara, measured her with a calm gaze, and said, "Today God spoke through hands that don't give up." "Today he spoke through people whose only weapon is their courage," she answered. A boy ran out from behind his mother's skirt with a ball, then stopped short when he saw the orange cones. He looked at Lara, curious. "Can I play here again?" Lara gave a tired smile. "Not yet, champ. Give me a bit to clean this up. Then you can score on me." Farther on, in the shade of Don Julio's workshop, another knot of people formed, voices drier, uneasy. "This isn't over," a woman said, clutching her bag. "If they come back, they'll come back for revenge," a man added, eyes on the ground. "They've done worse. And if they learn who the nurse really is," someone whispered, "if they know it was her, they'll bring more." Lara listened without stepping in, knowing fear also needs air to leave. At her side, Marco tipped his head, asking to speak. "Neighbors," he said clearly, without raising his voice. "We won time today. Time is for organizing better. If you see something strange, don't talk about it out loud. Come to us. We'll protect names and routes." A woman raised her hand, brow tight. "And when you leave?" "We're not leaving," Lara said. "Not until this stands stronger than a load-bearing wall." Dr. Ruiz arrived from the health center with a box of gauze and his usual dry humor. "Lighter now. If it weren't for you, we'd have a double line in emergency," he joked. "But hey, don't invite so many patients to your living room again." Lara laughed for the first time in hours, and the laugh rippled like a small wave that cut the tension. "I promise I'm closing the clinic today," she said. "Tomorrow we'll see." The murmurs returned, different now. Some looked at Lara with pride, others with a respect that brushes fear. The word heroin slipped along the reporting line and ran into revenge. A young man in a cap, hands nervous, came to the tape. "Thanks for what you did," he said, lowering his voice. "But try not to walk alone." "I don't walk alone," she said, pointing with her chin at the neighbors, Marco, and the patrol. "I was never alone." Don Julio, the carpenter, arrived with a box of nails and 2 straight boards. He planted himself by Lara's broken doorway. "If we're going to be afraid, let's be afraid while we work," he said. "I'll raise your door today." "Make it strong," Lara asked. "One that creaks nicely when it closes, and one no one can knock down," he finished with a wink. By mid-morning, with the heat pushing dust against the walls, the square turned into an improvised community hall. Police took statements with patience. The National Guard rotated shifts in silence. The health center handed out electrolyte drinks. One neighbor started a big pot of coffee, another sliced bread. Lara walked among them without hurry, answering questions, letting her gaze rest on each person's eyes. No grand promises, no speeches, simple instructions, basic care, close listening. But the whisper kept glowing like an ember under ash. "Who is the nurse, really?" A kid showed a blurry phone photo of a plaque found in the house. Someone must have seen it by accident. It read Montes, in worn letters. Another swore she moved, like in the movies. Father Rubio asked for calm. Not the time to speculate. "What we know," Lara said, steady, "is that we take care of each other here. The rest, when it's time, will be said properly and face to face." People came to give thanks. Senora Lopez, baby sleeping on her chest, hugged Lara with one free arm. "You came to my house when we needed you," she reminded her. "Today it was your turn. And tomorrow it'll be someone else's," Lara said. "But together." Before noon, the rush eased a notch. Children dared to kick the ball 3 times at the corner. A dog chased its own shadow. 2 teens swept glass as if it were dry leaves. Fear was still there, sitting on a bench waiting for news. But it no longer commanded. It had started to bargain. Lara finally sat on her porch with a cup of coffee someone had filled without asking. She looked at her street. Not unhurt, but alive. She knew that for some, her name would be relief. For others, a spark of unease. And she understood that both fit inside the same wounded heart of a town learning to breathe again. The midday sun fell like a warm blanket over the village. The square smelled of coffee and damp earth, and the murmur of the people was different. No longer shouts or cries, but voices searching for understanding. At the entrance of the health center, Sergeant Bravo set up a table and asked for silence. Beside him stood the municipal prosecutor, 2 forensic experts, and Marco. Lara stood a step behind, her bandaged forearm clean, her gaze steady. "Neighbors," said the prosecutor, raising a folder. "We will give you clear information, no rumors. We do this to cut the fear. First, there are 9 detainees, including the man who led the others. Second, weapons, phones, and a drone camera were secured. Third, Nurse Lara's house was attacked and defended. She is fine." A murmur ran through the line. Don Ernesto, seated on a folding chair, nodded silently. Dona Carmen placed a hand on her chest. In the group near the workshop, someone whispered, "How did she defend herself?" Sergeant Bravo lifted another transparent folder. Inside it gleamed a worn metal plaque, its letters clear under the sunlight. During the house inspection, he said, "We found this identification. It has been verified by the competent authority. It belongs to Lara Montes. Rank Colonel. Unit. Special Forces. Retired." The murmur became a wave. The word colonel spread across the square like a spark. A child asked loudly, "Is that more than doctor?" A pair of young people looked at each other wide-eyed. Dona Carmen pressed her lips together, proud. Others furrowed their brows, surprised and a bit tense. Lara stepped toward the table, took a deep breath, and spoke without a microphone. Her voice came out clear, at the height of all. "Yes," she said, "I was a colonel. I served many years. I learned to plan, to care for my team, and to protect people who couldn't defend themselves. When I hung up my uniform, I chose this coat and this town. I didn't come to hide. I came to live peacefully and work at the hospital." A neighbor raised his hand, hesitant. "Why didn't you tell us?" Lara held his gaze. "Because it wasn't necessary. You knew me as a nurse. That was enough. Today I tell you the truth because it's right for you to know. And so you understand why I didn't run last night." Don Julio, with sawdust in his hair and a board on his shoulder, smiled with respect. "I don't know about ranks," he said, "but I know about people who don't back down. Thank you, Colonel, or nurse, or both." A couple of women approached unsure. Won't this cause problems? One asked. If they find out. Lara didn't shy away from the question. Truth doesn't bring problems. Those who choose to harm bring them. If someone seeks to hurt, it won't be because of a title. It will be because of what we stand for together. And here, we stand for not being broken. The prosecutor interjected in a practical tone. For everyone's peace of mind, state and federal authorities have been notified. There will be a permanent presence for a few days. Safe entry and exit routes will also be set up for the town, and an anonymous reporting channel will be available. Marco stepped forward, holding the drone camera in a transparent bag. This, he explained, shows that the attackers were watching the community. Not just one person. With this evidence, and with your reports, we will open the way for more arrests. Father Rubio joined the conversation, his hands together. Truth doesn't make us invincible, he said, but it orders us from within. Today we know who Lara is. Tomorrow, we'll keep knowing who we are. A teenager, with his cap turned backwards, spoke up. I thought special forces were just in the movies, he admitted. But last night I saw my sister leave water and serum at the health center door without fear. I think special forces can also be that. Some laughed. Lara smiled slightly. Yes, she replied. Special forces are the hands that heal, the doors that open, the word that doesn't betray. My badge doesn't make me more than anyone. It reminds me of one duty. Never abandon. A brief silence fell, and the prosecutor closed the folder. It's official, he announced. Lara Montes, retired colonel, nurse at the health center. Any media inquiries will receive this version. No embellishments, no exaggerations. A local reporter, with her cell phone in hand, recorded a short clip. Lara, a few words for the municipal radio? Lara looked at the camera as if speaking to a neighbor. We are not alone, she said. If you're afraid, say it. If you saw something, report it through the secure channel. If you need help, knock on my door or the health center door. And if you think you can't go on, breathe. We've got your back. The reporter lowered her cell, her eyes shining. Thank you. Sergeant Bravo indicated that the complaint table would remain open until the afternoon. Dona Carmen offered more coffee. Don Julio crouched to measure the frame of Lara's door. Two children, discreetly, began picking up pebbles from the floor as if gathering constellations. Lara returned to her porch. She sat for a moment, let the sun warm her bandage, and placed the cup on her knee. She listened to her heart return to its normal rhythm. The truth was no longer a hidden box in a wall. It was a letter on the table. She felt relief. She also felt the weight of what had been said. She looked at her wounded house, looked at the town, and told herself that now the hardest part came. Lowering her guard within without losing it outside. Marco approached slowly. Are you okay? I'm fine, she replied. And that's already a lot. Rest a bit, he suggested. We'll follow the rest. In a bit, Lara said, looking at the edge of the sky. First, I want to think. She stayed still, without hurry, letting the noise of the square turn into a gentle murmur. The truth had come to light. Now it was time to understand what had been lived. The afternoon began to slowly fade, painting the town in a soft, warm orange. Lara stayed there, on the porch, the coffee cup in her hands, watching the horizon. Her mind was still working, but at a different, calmer level now. She no longer heard the sounds of the patrols or the hurried voices of the agents. The town, still with traces of fear, was breathing with less tension. Inside her, the weight of the memories didn't disappear, but it no longer crushed her. Lara looked to the future, with the usual uncertainty, but also with the certainty that she had something to protect. What would have become of me if I hadn't stayed? She thought. The memories of the hardest moments were still alive. the whispers of those who doubted her or feared what her presence represented. She remembered how that very morning the murmurs of the neighbors grew loud, as if the truth had divided her. Some looked at her like a heroine, others like a threat. That duality had never been new to her. In the army, she had learned to be seen in many ways, from admiration to the deepest fear. And now, in this small town, the situation was no different. She had come hoping to find peace, but just like in her past, the price of that peace was the constant struggle, both internal and external. In her memories, the image of the previous night repeated, not like a nightmare, but like a slow and painful movie. The cartel men, the violence she had known up close, and the hard decisions she had made. She knew that, although she had been ready for anything, vulnerability was always present. The wound on her arm reminded her with every movement that she wasn't invincible, that she was human, and that humanity was what gave her strength, despite the scars she carried, not only physical but also invisible, the ones that are made when one is forced to make life or death decisions. I'm still here, she thought, looking at the footprints the sicarios had left in the house. And that means something. It means it was worth it. For a moment, she stopped thinking about the future. She allowed herself to just be Lara, not the nurse, not the colonel, not the woman who had survived. Just her, with the steaming coffee cup in her hands, and the sun beginning to set. In her mind, the images of the people she had saved passed by, of the harm she had prevented, and of those who still looked at her as someone who could be their support. Although some feared that this would repeat, that the cartel might return for revenge, she couldn't help but feel connected to this place, to these people. This small town had given her something that she couldn't find anywhere else, a purpose beyond the fight. A child ran past her house with his ball, and she paused for a moment to watch him, remembering the freshness of youth and the simplicity of life before all the chaos. She smiled faintly. Maybe peace wasn't completely in her hands, but the responsibility of creating an environment where everyone could aspire to it was. She remembered the faces of each neighbor, each with their doubts and fears, but also with a hope that hadn't been extinguished yet. That's what matters, she thought, closing her eyes for a moment. Sometimes it's not about winning, she reflected, looking at the house that now began to seem less like a battlefield and more like a home. It's about standing up. She slowly got up from her chair, leaving the empty cup on the table. She didn't have answers for everything, nor could she promise that the shadows of the past wouldn't return. But she did know something for certain. This town needed her, her will, her strength, and she was ready to move forward. There were no more doubts inside her, only the commitment to protect what was left. The door opened gently, and Marco entered. His expression was relaxed, but the fatigue still showed on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked, watching her from the doorway. Lara nodded, her gaze firm but soft. There was something in her, a fire that had been extinguished, but that still burned quietly. "Yes," she replied, looking at the horizon one last time before turning back to him. "I'm fine, but this is just beginning." Marco smiled slightly, and, as if understanding what she meant, walked closer. "So you're staying?" he asked softly. Lara looked at him, and for a second, her eyes sparkled with the same determination that had kept her standing that night. "Yes, I'm staying, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep everyone safe. Here now, with my people." Marco nodded, without saying anything more. Words weren't necessary. The determination in her eyes said it all. Night fell, and the last rays of the sun faded completely, giving way to the stars. Lara stayed there, on her porch, looking at the sky that had always been her refuge. "It's okay," she thought. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, and give a like so you won't miss more stories like this one. See you next time.